Greetings at Cheating Story Lab. Share your location here. Few things are told about deceit. It's not the stab in the back that harms you. It's the prolonged period of questioning why something feels off before you eventually discover the cause. On the day Olivia passed the bar exam, she didn't return home. Instead, she texted me at 9 p.m. from a downtown hotel bar where her law school friends were celebrating, stating she'd get a rideshare in the morning and expressing her love for me. That message of affection was false, I now realize. Yet, at that time, I actually smiled upon reading it, as we had been married for 10 years, together for 12. I was 23 when we met. She was 22, working retail and studying for her undergraduate degree while I was a junior project manager at a mid-sized construction firm. My income wasn't extravagant, but it was sufficient. I admired her intellect, ambition, and the way she spoke about her future as if it were a territory to be conquered. I stood by her side through all challenges: law school expenses, rent, groceries, even her car payment after her Civic accident during her second year. She often studied for 16 hours a day, and I never grumbled. I prepared meals on Sundays, kept our apartment quiet, typically went to bed alone as she was usually at the library. Reflecting now, I can pinpoint the instant when it became clear she didn't include me in our future plans anymore. It was April 3 years before she qualified as a lawyer. We attended a networking event at Morrison & Hale's firm, one of those tense cocktail parties where law students mingle like pilots during an air show. Olivia conversed with a senior partner from Morrison & Hale for 20 minutes. He was in his 50s, sporting gray temples and an expensive watch. When she eventually returned to me after speaking with him, I was near the buffet table. She gazed at me as if I was in a Halloween costume, not understanding, rather seeming puzzled about my presence. "You needn't have come," she whispered softly. "These gatherings are primarily for students and lawyers." I'd sacrificed a half day from work to attend, dressed in the only suit I owned. "I wanted to encourage you," I said. Her smile remained distant, not reaching her eyes. "I understand. That's touching. But perhaps next time you could allow me to manage these situations independently." It was that moment, though I didn't fully grasp it then. Over the ensuing 3 years, I observed her gradually distancing herself in subtle increments, persuading myself that I was mistaken. She stopped inquiring about my day, ceased laughing at my jokes, started sleeping on the opposite edge of the bed with her back to me, as if avoiding my warmth. I told myself it was due to stress. Law school followed by bar preparation and the exam itself were demanding. I believed she'd return when it was over, but then she passed. The following day, Friday, she returned home at midday and handed me an envelope. She declared, "I am filing for divorce," standing in our kitchen, still adorned in her morning blazer. A recent visit to a law office was evident from the sticker still affixed to her lapel. She had already procured legal representation. She suggested I follow suit. I recall fixating on the envelope. It bore her name, Olivia Brennan, attorney at law. New business cards were printed within, which I noticed before she'd even received confirmation. "Why?" I inquired. My voice echoed strangely. "We've grown apart," she replied, having clearly rehearsed this. It seemed she had been practicing these words during car rides. "I think we both acknowledge that this relationship hasn't worked for quite some time. I need to concentrate on my career now. You deserve someone who can offer more attention." This seemed like the breakup speech one would give to a boyfriend of 6 months, not a husband with whom they had shared over a decade. I immediately unfolded the envelope, revealing a 30-page petition. She demanded half of all our assets, including the house my parents had co-purchased with us, which was only in my name due to her damaged credit from student loans. "You've already written about this," I pointed out. "How long have you been plotting this?" She replied indifferently. Instead of meeting my gaze, she focused on her phone. "I'll temporarily reside with a friend as we settle this. I'll arrange for movers to collect my belongings next week," and then she left abruptly. She grabbed her handbag, laptop, and a decade of my life in the process. However, it's important to note, I'm not naive, and I don't get taken aback without sensing an approaching catastrophe. For 3 years, I suspected something amiss, so I took action, an act I'm not particularly proud of, yet one that ultimately proved beneficial. Approximately 2 years prior to our divorce, I commenced maintaining financial records, not due to suspicion of infidelity, as I never found any proof of this, but because funds were mysteriously vanishing. At first, It was small sums, $100 here and there withdrawn from our shared account with dubious explanations like books or study materials. Then the amounts grew, reaching 1,000, then 2,000. When I inquired about these withdrawals, she became defensive, accusing me of being controlling, asserting that as an adult, she was not obliged to account for her expenditures. Henceforth, I ceased inquiring and started documenting instead. I established a separate account and began transferring my bonuses there. Over the past 2 years, I surreptitiously transferred approximately $40,000 into an undisclosed account. Moreover, I began documenting every transaction from our joint account, including withdrawals, transfers, and purchases. Upon scrutiny, a pattern emerged. She wasn't merely spending money on school expenses. Rather, she was funding a lifestyle that excluded me. Expensive dinners at unfamiliar neighborhoods, hotel accommodations, transportation fees, late-night downtown activities, and high-end clothing purchases from stores beyond our budget were all part of this hidden life. 3 months before she filed for anything, I engaged the services of a forensic accountant named Phil, who works from a strip mall office in the suburbs. He resembled a high school math teacher. Upon my presentation of 2 years' worth of bank statements, he traced $60,000 that had disappeared, revealing that she had been transferring money into a separate account, which grew progressively larger over time. $15,000 withdrawn as retainer for a divorce attorney hired 6 months ago. A hollow feeling gripped me, not in my heart, but something deeper, the part that trusts people are essentially good. I sought proof of all this, to which Phil replied affirmatively, pushing a bound report towards his desk. It contained dates, amounts, transaction IDs, evidence she had been secretly amassing funds and plotting divorce while relying on my income. I paid him, took the report home, and securely stored it in a fireproof safe in my garage. When Olivia eventually filed for divorce, I remained calm, refraining from contacting her or pleading. Instead, I hired attorney Karen Delgado, who had previously handled my cousin's divorce 3 years prior, and handed over all relevant documents, bank statements, Phil's report, the evidence. Karen praised the timeline, calling it good, even great. She'll find it challenging to argue entitlement to marital assets when she's been secretly moving funds and planning to leave you. What happens next? I inquired. We will respond to her petition, submit a counter motion, request full disclosure on her finances, and wait for her mistake. Surprisingly, her error occurred sooner than anticipated. 2 weeks post-petition, David Chun from Morrison & Hale, the firm Olivia had been connected with for years, delivered a formal discovery demand. They demanded comprehensive documentation of all my assets, income, retirement funds, and more. The request was pushy and seemingly ill-informed, as providing such documents is mandatory during discovery proceedings. This meant that Olivia was obligated to disclose her financial records, and on the same day, Karen filed our motion for summary judgment, requesting access to all accounts, transactions, and credit card statements from the past 3 years. Chen attempted to resist this broad request, arguing it was excessive, but the judge was firm. Olivia was given 30 days to submit the documents. 3 weeks later, Karen called me urgently, asking me to visit her office during work hours. Upon arrival, I found Karen surrounded by bank statements, credit card bills, hotel receipts, all spread across her desk. She made no effort to conceal these documents. Instead, she sounded shocked and almost incredulous, stating that she hadn't expected us to investigate or care, as Olivia had spent over $80,000 in 2 years. Money derived from our shared account, her student loans, credit cards in both our names. She indulged in luxuries such as 5-star accommodations, high-end fashion, expensive dinners beyond our monthly grocery expenditure, all while I labored 60-hour weeks to maintain our financial stability. Karen disclosed additional information, producing a singular document. She opened a line of credit under your name, borrowed $15,000 without informing you, used it for her bar exam preparation expenses. I scrutinized the paper, recognizing my signature but noting discrepancies, an overly wide loop on the D, a too high cross on the T. The signature was forged, I asserted, to which Karen replied, yes, implying fraud. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for June 6th. I arrived dressed in formal attire, while Olivia donned a striking black skirt suit, heels, and a tightly coiled bun, her appearance suggesting readiness for an argument before the Supreme Court. Chen accompanied her, carrying a pricey leather briefcase. We sat opposite each other in the courtroom, with Olivia deliberately avoiding eye contact. Judge Patricia Rourke, a woman in her 60s, summoned us forward. Chen rose and presented a prepared argument about how Olivia had jeopardized her earning potential by completing her education, utilized marital funds for this purpose, and was entitled to half of the assets acquired during marriage, including the house. Subsequently, it was Karen's turn. She didn't deliver a speech. Instead, she submitted Phil's report and a stack of bank statements, as well as the doctored credit application, to the judge, stating, "Your Honor, This reveals Olivia's unauthorized use of my signature for fraudulent purposes. For more than 2 years, Brennan has systematically defrauded my client, concealing funds, making unauthorized purchases, and opening credit lines using forged signatures. We're not debating asset division. We're disputing restitution." Chin paled, and for the first time in months, Olivia looked at me with fear in her eyes. Judge Rourke spent 20 minutes reviewing the documents silently. The only sounds were the air conditioner and paper shuffling. "Mr. Chun," the judge finally said, "had you examined your client's financial records before filing this petition?" Clearing his throat, Chin replied that standard due diligence was conducted. However, such diligence would have exposed my client's fraudulent activities. Judge Rourke stated sternly, "This court frowns upon parties who use marital funds for personal gain and then seek additional compensation." "Olivia, do you have something to share?" She rose, prepared to speak, but found herself speechless. The judge instructed her to sit down. "This matter will proceed to a trial," he continued, "with comprehensive financial disclosure in the process. If I deem it necessary, additional details will be unveiled. Understanding that Brennan deceitfully defrauded her spouse, I will grant him not only his individual possessions, but also reimbursement for money misspent during the matrimony." Olivia comprehended, looking as if she might vomit. We departed from the courtroom. I managed to reach my car before Karen phoned. She stated that they wished to negotiate a settlement. Intrigued, I asked what the offer entailed. She disclosed that Brennan would retain her personal items in her vehicle, he'd keep the house, retirement funds, and she agreed to repay him $20,000 over 5 years. Additionally, she consented to relinquish all claims to his future income, as well as the fraud charge. I questioned Karen about the fraud admission, and she hesitated before stating that Brennan was prepared to confess to it in writing, which means that you could pursue criminal charges if desired. I pondered this, considering Olivia seated in a courtroom, her budding legal career on the verge of collapse even before it had begun. I contemplated her having to explain to future employers why she was disbarred before she'd handled her first case. I agreed to the settlement, but requested one more thing. I desired her resignation from Morrison and Hale, and a written statement that she departed voluntarily due to misconduct issues. They refused this demand, so we proceeded to trial, and I filed a bar complaint, leaving it up to the ethics board to decide whether someone who commits fraud should be permitted to practice law. Karen phoned back an hour later, reporting that they consented to every condition. Olivia resigned from Morrison and Hale 3 days after that. The agreement was sealed in August. She relocated to an unknown state, and it matters not to me. I obtained the house, recovered my financial losses, regained control of my life. But there's one lingering thought that occasionally disturbs me. During the final settlement signing, the last time I saw her, she gazed at me across the table and said, "I never thought you'd fight back." It struck me then that was the crux of the issue. She'd presumed I was too kind, too loyal, too naive to safeguard myself. She believed I would always be the same person I was when we first met, the one who'd do anything for her, give up everything without questioning. She was correct about my nature, but failed to comprehend that I had been observing her transform into someone unfamiliar. And when you witness such a change, you have 2 options: ignore it or ensure your own survival in the face of their transformation. I opted for survival, an act she never anticipated. If you've reached this point, click like and subscribe. Leave a comment mentioning your location, and share if you've ever found it necessary to defend yourself against someone unaware of your loyalty, as more tales are forthcoming.